challenge. Baruch Hashem was very nice, I must say. Baruch Hashem. Very, very good. Exhausting. No, I don't walk on the children. Actually, giving this share, saying that we put the children to bed. That's something. Now you know. Yes. I have to start a lighter note a bit. It's not working this thing in a second. Oh, it is. Oh, good evening. Who's on it? Moshe, are you okay?
Hello.
Let me see if you have this. You know, Chaim Brisk was a genius beyond a genius. He was a very huge Talmud Chacham, was a very clever person. Unfortunately, with genius, you unfortunately have what's often a symptom is sometimes people go a bit strange. One of his sons went a bit strange. Sally, you knew about this? One of the sons went a bit strange. No, not Yosef Hashon. One of the Chaim. So, for example, he used to sometimes take a sefer and push it in a buggy. They'd ask him, why are you putting a sefer in a buggy? He would say, because it's saying childish things. Or he would sometimes tear out a page of the Rambam and say it's saying something incorrect. They would say, but on one side say something incorrect, but the other side might be okay. So he would say, it's a wicked man, it's a wicked neighbor, you don't know good. One of the things he used to do is, he used to eat soup with a fork.
What's the name of this son?
I don't say in case of Rabbi no. One of them, it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, when you got very clever people, sometimes they go a bit strange. He used to eat soup with a fork. I'm going to give it hot water to anybody who can tell me why. Why did he drink? What was his reason for eating soup with a fork? It wasn't. Everything he gave reason to. If it's a childish thing, it pushed the safe in the bug. Yeah, he was a genius. Why would he eat soup with a fork? What? I thought you'd chap it. Because halacha is anything less than 3 tefachim is a lovud. Lovud states that the whole thing is connected. So a fork, there's no spaces in a fork because of lovud. He used to hold of it very strongly. I was actually foolish, I was very tired. I was looking up these big shilas in halacha. When we've talked about it many times, you've got washing lines on top of a sukkah, and other things about lovud. There's a whole lomdus in lovud. Does lovud make it look as if the whole thing's blocked up and there's no space or not? So he used to eat soup with a fork because he used to hold that since there's a din lovud, there's no space between the prongs. So therefore, since there's physically no space, you should eat soup with a fork. As we say, unfortunately, everything comes.
There's a fine line they say between
yes,
genius
and insanity or something. Yeah.
Very fine line.
So we have to Chavdala the Mudala 4 lines from the top. We'll just say very briefly. We had the halacha, you can't use a cow or an elephant as a wall for your sukkah because we're chayshish it might die. And if it dies, you will not have a proper wall. We also said, the Gemara discusses that we're talking about where it's tied up, we'll not chayshish or walk away. Now the Gemara also says that if you've got a big barrel of wine, and you can't drink it all, you want to drink it now, you haven't got time to take 2 samaisos. So what the machlekes from Meir, and the Meir says you can drink now, relying that later you'll take 2 samaisos because you take 2 samaisos in your mind now and you separate it later. The problem is there's a possibility that the barrel will break. And if the barrel breaks, you'll end up having drunk the wine before you've actually taken the 2 samaisos. The Gemara now compares the two that we see regarding an animal. Rameir says, don't use an animal as a wall. Why not? It might die. Regarding a barrel, that's what it says in a minute. Very good. The Gemara pushes its wigs a bit. But at this stage of the Gemara tries to compare. Very good. You ask questions. You have to ask questions. I could see when I was away and I was speaking to myself. It just doesn't work. More questions, the better. But anyway, so what happens? A dead animal is okay.
Why do they say about
No, because a live animal, if you use it as a wall and then it dies during sukkahs, it will collapse. And during the collapsing, you will not notice it died. And you thought you had a wall 10 tefachim high. It collapsed and now it's only 9 tefachim high. You don't have a wall. That's the problem.
The only reason why
That's at this stage of the Gemara. And we discussed it, right? So the Gemara says like this, that why is Rameir not concerned about the barrel breaking, but he is concerned about the animal dying? Seemingly it's the same problem, something expiring. So why is it that by one he is chayshish, one is not? No, it says, Kasha d'Rameir. death is common, breaking a barrel is not common. Why? You can actually make sure that the barrel doesn't break. The way the Rishonim writes is like this. With an animal, it's a dead certainty. It doesn't use those words, but it's a dead certainty that it will become dead. With a barrel, it isn't. Barrels can last forever, theoretically. So therefore, you can't compare the chashash the animal might die to the chashash that the barrel will break. Rabbi Yehuda holds you're all allowed to use an animal. He's not concerned it might die. And yet when it comes to Trumas HaMaisros, he says, don't use the wine because it might break. So what Rabbi Yehuda, like Tony said, it's not because he's scared it will break. He holds we do not say retroactive designation, Moshe. Remember that retroactive designation? But the point is that if you take Trumas HaMaisros now, that means you say in your mind, this is the bowl, that 10% in there is going to be Trumas HaMaisros. Later you drink it, and then the 10% you take away will be Trumas HaMaisros. He doesn't rely on Breo. Since he doesn't rely on Breo, you can't drink it now because you don't know what the Trumas HaMaisros is. Is that the truth? It's not. It is not it might break. Are you not worried that the barrel will break? This is a and he's drinking teva by retroactively. So we see that the argument that Rabbi Yehuda posed to Rameir was what? What was the argument he said to him? The barrel might break. He didn't say a word about breva. So we see the problem of Rabbi Yehuda was not because of breaking, not because of breva, because of breaking, the barrel might break. It says, Rameir replied, I'll worry about it when it breaks. And says, no. Rabbi Yehuda was speaking the shitose to Rameir. More says this many times. It means, let's say, for example, you say an argument which I don't agree with. I don't want to come up with an argument which you could just say I don't agree with. So what I want to do is come up with something which I would think that even you would have to agree with. That means the real machlekes of Rabbi Yehuda is about breva. But what happens is Rabbi Yehuda wants to force the issue. So he says to him, okay, you're relying on breva, I don't hold the breva. I'm not going to say to you I don't hold the breva because that you'll just disregard me by saying to me, but I do hold the breva, therefore we'll go back and forth and get anywhere. What I say to you is, even according to you that you're relying on breva, but there's still a problem. What's the problem? That the barrel might break and never get to it. So the Gemara says, that's what almost Rabbi Yehuda, the comment of Amir, lediti, lessly breva, I don't hold the breva. According to you that you do hold the breva. You're not considered the barrel might break. I'll worry about it when it breaks. Okay. So the Ma'is of the Gemara over here says, we've got machlekes of Rabbi Yehuda whether we're chayshish for death or not. And it has a number of ramifications. A couple we mentioned yesterday. One is about using as a wool for a sukkah. Another one, can a woman eat truma relying that the husband's still alive? And another one is regarding taking Trumas HaMaisros from a barrel or yecheshes the barrel might break. Says the Gemara, is Rabbi Yehuda not concerned about death? But tonight we have a Mishnah which we should all be familiar with, that before Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol would be prepared a wife and would give him a second wife. Why? We gave him a prepare a second wife. So you see that we are concerned about death. If we're not concerned about death, why does the Kohen Gadol need to have a second wife? When it came to Yom Kippur, where the whole kapor of the whole nation of Klal Yisrael is dependent on the fact that the Kohen Gadol should be able to do that avodah correctly, then we have no choice and we are concerned about death. So normally we're not, here we are. Says what? That means we just said that using an animal for wool of your sukkah, according to Amir, is no good because it might die. And then also made another shit, it might run away. That means these are problems which are not derived. So these are problems which potentially might come up. But essentially, there's no problem as it is now. Says the Gemara, really, it's a good wool. That means you can use a cow as a wool for your sukkah. Where chayshish midrabanon, maybe it will die. Rabbanon goes to and matter the halacha is that if you use a lid for a coffin, the lid of the coffin is tummy, even if there are no other reasons for it to be tummy. For example, let's say there's a space gap, you put another wall. Anything which is used as a lid, as a cover for a corpse, is considered tumah. So, for example, you've got these matzeva stones, etc. Those are tumah. So now, what happens if you use a live animal for such a matzeva stone? The halacha is, holds it's not tummy because of kilo. Now, here there's a problem, because if min hateva it can be used as a wall, let be tummy, are you going to say there's a chashash to rabbanon, it might move away? Chashash to rabbanon is always lechum. That means lechum we can say, don't use it as a wall for a sukkah. It might walk away, it might die. But to say a kula, to permit it and say that it's not tome because it's not a wall, where do you get such a thing from? Meaning, it's not because it might die, not because it might run away, but essentially a live animal cannot be a mechitza. The reason is, what makes a live animal stand? It's life, it's spirit, it's breath. A breath is something which is not tangible. Since it's not tangible, so therefore it's not something which is considered real, and therefore it's not a real mechitza. And that is a problem in Hater. It's not, it might die, it might run away. As it is now, it is not a mechitza. A mechitza which is dependent on air, and air is not a tangible matter, is not considered a mechitza. Ikedomi, some say a slightly different version. Something which a human being hasn't made, ain't a mechitza, is not a mechitza. A cow, its life is not man-made. It comes from Hashem. A human being can't create life. And the Rishonim explain over here like this. It doesn't mean that you have to use a wall of a sukkah which is man-made. Let's example, you've got a mountain, a cliff on the sides of a mountain, and you put a sukkah up against using the cliffs as a wall. Is that good? Of course it is good. Oh, it's not man-made. What? The shade, yes, forget. It's even better. You've got proper shade. So the problem is, why by an animal? What's the difference between an animal and a cliff? They say like this. A cliff could be human-made. You could, if you wanted to, build bricks and make yourself a wall. But shaking an animal, you cannot. Something which cannot be made by human beings cannot be made of mechitza. My benai, what's the difference? Let's say you go and you inflate a boat, or you're going on your beach. And what happens is you get an inflatable, and you inflate it as a wall, and then you use it as a mechitza for your sukkah. So Moses says, the mechitza which stands only through air is not a mechitza. I made this beruach. This is standing with air, so it's not really a mechitza. The man when I say b'dei adam, it's not made by human hand. Top of Chavdal of the Beis, Hari Asuya b'dei adam, it is made by human hand, and therefore it is kosher. A dead animal would be okay according to everybody. There's no chashash it would run away. There's no chashash that it might die, and there's no chashash that it's only living there by air. But only if it's going to start smelling within 7 days. If it's preserved, let's say. Yeah, if it's preserved, or if it's done something to it, which is made sure that it won't start smelling, then it is okay. The Beis says we had the machlokes of Choshesh for Misa or not. It's got many nafkiminas, primarily Gavigittin and Chattas. The Succca talks about for man says the Chattas, can you bring korban? But now we're moving on to a new topic, and halacha is that you can't use a live animal to write a get on it. And we're going to discuss this next Gemara. Actually comes up a number of times in Shas, quite a number of times, word for word, exactly the same Gemara. So it's quite well known. You can't write a get on an animal. The Tanya Sefer, the Pasuk says, if a person marries a woman he doesn't like, he wants to divorce her, because of law, Sefer Grisus. The word Sefer can have two translations. What are the two translations of the word Sefer? A book or an account. Very good. A story. There's a Sipur. Sipur in Nevet is a story. Right? Sipur is a story. So the Gemara of Rabbi really understood that the word Sefer means a book. A Sefer, you can write for her. He could have written Sefer Yichtov Lo, but it said the word for Kosav Lo, you should write for her, and then afterwards limits it to a book. So we come, okay, in Kemata Sefer. It's not alive, it's not a food. Anything which is not alive and not a food. According to Beis, you can't write a get on a food, you can't write a get on a live animal. Rabbi, in a book of the commerce, the Chachamim hold that you don't need a book, and you're allowed to write a get on an animal, you're allowed to write a get on a food. And the word sefer just means the story, meaning within the get, you have to write the details of the story of the get, meaning that you have to describe what is happening in the get. In the get, you have to say with this, I'm divorcing you, that you should be most permitted to any man. So therefore, the word sefer for him is just a story. What the dash with the word v'kosav? So what it says, A person can only divorce his wife with a get, not with money. The halacha is that Isha niknes with shloisha dvar. You can marry a woman with 3 ways, kesef shtabir. But she's only let go. What's the 2 ways? With the death of her husband and with a get. There's a famous story of Kivega, well-known story, that there was a man who refused to divorce his wife because he had become, he had joined the Haskalah movement and refused to believe in any Yiddishkeit. So he said, it's nonsense to write a get. So the Kivega said to me, I'm sure when you were a child, you learned the first Mishnah in Kiddushin that a man inquires a wife 3 ways and he lets it go with 2, either with his death or with divorce. You've got a choice. You can choose divorce or chas shalom the other. And the man mocked and laughed and he walked out of the basin and dropped down dead. So it's a documented story. The point is that the Torah says that you could only get divorced through get, not through money. Why would you think money would work? The Torah says, she shall be divorced and she can then marry someone else. From there we learn many halachas in Kiddushin, that a lot of the halachas of divorce and marriage are compared to each other. So you might have thought, just like marriages with money after you say bekesef, kamashma not. But what we say, really, I swore me nolly. Me sefer krisis nafrele, sefer kurso, the book can cut off divorce of a davacha kurso. But what we do, we put the davacha kurso, but not that a get has to be a complete cutoff. Kedetanya as a gitech, I'm not shlitish to yan, I'm not shlitich besavich leolam in the krisis. If a person divorces his wife with a condition that she should never drink wine or never visit her parents, the halacha is it's not a get. Why is it not a get? Because a get has to be a sefer krisis. Krisis means a cutting away. This woman is forever and ever going to be on some level attached to her husband because she'll always be forbidden to drink wine or to visit her parents. So therefore, there's some attachment. Called shloshim yomi, if the condition is only for 30 days, how is a krisis? It's a get. So the halacha from krisis is that it should be a cutoff. We learn from the extra word chorus, and it says the word krisis, the locked off at the end. They don't dash it. So the Maisa. Rabbi Yosef holds that sefer means a book. Chacham hold that sefer means a storytelling, and that in the get you have to say over the story. Rabbi Yosef, because he learns from that it's a book, he learns you cannot use food or a live animal. The Chacham disagree, and they permit either one of these as a kosher get. All the other halachas, they agree with each other. They both agree that there has to be a cutoff forever. They both agree that you can't divorce with money. And they both agree with all the other halachas. They just disagree how you learn it out. One man learns 2 things for krisis, one learns 1 thing for krisis. The only machlekes they're left with is, are you allowed to divorce a woman with a live animal or with a piece of food? And that's to do with the word sefer, a book, which eliminates those things. The word sefer just means a storytelling, which includes those things. Says the Mishnah. The person makes a sukkah, and the trees are just as walls, but nothing more than walls, then that's okay. We talked about before using the sukkah as a support. That is when you make the sukkah on the wall, on a tree. So what did I say? On a tree. If you use a tree as to build, that's no good. But here, all you're doing is you're using the trees as a wall around the sukkah. That's fine. You can use that. There's nothing wrong with that. Any partition that can't withstand a normal wind, is not a partition. This one line of Gemara gives nightmares to thousands and thousands of Yidden every sukkah. And the problem is nowadays there's a very, very popular sukkah from Succca Mart, which is a canvas sukkah. The problem is a canvas sukkah does not withstand the wind. It means it sways with the wind. And the question is swaying okay or not okay? This is an argument which there are many opinions. There are those who hold that even a small swaying is no good. There are those who hold that it's only if it sways more than 3 tefachim. And this makes a big problem for those who have difficulty in building a proper sukkah and want to run a canvas sukkah. It's a machlekas. And that's a big question. I know it's so. When I was there, I lived there. There were people that what they used to do is they used to build a canvas sukkah that put strings around it, and then that way they've got the lovud. You mentioned right at the beginning, the fork, the lovud. Now you won't forget the halachas of lovud because you'll eat chicken soup tomorrow night with a fork, right? So therefore they used to put strings that way you get both. Okay. So the halacha is it has to withstand a normal wind. All the Gemara does now for the next amud, and we'll just do that amud and we'll stop. Oh, no, a normal, common wind in that area, within that area. Now the Gemara just tries to disprove again and again and again, and eventually the Gemara does not manage to disprove it, and therefore it's halacha l'maisa. So now, we discuss on this one, the trees or walls for its kasheira. So here we've got kosher sukkah. How? With walls made out of trees. Because of Asi, the trees move with the wind. I wonder, we're talking about strong trees that don't move with the wind. Furthermore, that's very good for the bark and the trunk. We're talking about the branches. What about the branches? The branches certainly move with the wind. Moses says, the Gemara is going to say this answer many times. So let's get the answer clear once, and then it's very easy. Hutzav Adafna are just names of branches. Branches of palm trees, branches of thorns. What you basically do is, you take the branches, you weave within the branches other branches, until you have some sort, it's in this picture, we can't see it very well, until you weave within it other branches, and that makes it firm and it does not move. That is what it means, the Odeh Hutzav Adafna, because of many times in Shas. The Odeh Hutzav Adafna just means you've got a weak barrier, which would normally sway easily, but all you do is you add branches or thorns or sticks, and you weave them within the weaker barrier, and by weaving the two together, you now have a firm branch. You've got branches that don't move in the wind because it goes over with some Daphne. And that's what the Gemara says again and again. What's the Chiddush of our Mishnah? You've got proper trees, proper branches. You might be Choshesh, you'll come to use the tree. Let's say you hang your coat on the tree on Succca, and you're not allowed to use a tree. Why not? You're not allowed to use a tree. You're never allowed to use a tree on Yom Tov and Shabbos because you might come to pull off a branch. Kamash Toshima. The halacha was, we mentioned it once many before, that what happened was that you've got a well, and the Yidden went up to Yerushalayim, and they needed to be able to drink water, and it's impossible to get close to the well, so you'd make little partitions around the well, and that was permitted. And what kind of partitions work? If there's a tree or a geder or a fence, or made out of reeds, you can use that as a partition. The problem is that they sway with the wind. We're talking about where you use other trees and other branches and other sticks to weave within to make sure that it does not sway with the wind. Toshma. Here we'll talk about a very, very beautiful tree. I don't know if you can see it in the picture over here, and then here's the picture. What happens is you've got a tree grows up, a beautiful canopy of branches all the way around, and they reach to within 3 tvachim of the floor, which is leveled. So in fact, within this tree is actually a room, and that room would be a Rishus HaYochid, and you'd be allowed to carry there on Shabbos. So let's example, you walk in the middle of the Peak District, or Lake District, in the middle of your holiday, and Sunday it's Shabbos, and you want to be able to carry within the tree. So if you've got this tree, which basically is like a tent, and the branches reach within 3 tvachim of the floor, you've got a nice room, you're allowed to carry within it. Ilon HaMeisech, that covers a lot, it's mainly if the branch is not 3 tvachim above the ground, all those branches certainly sway with the wind. And says, what's one going to answer? You weave into it other branches. Full stop. It's a question. This is a very important halacha. It's complicated. Remember, everyone should remember it better. The halacha is that a normal garden, you're allowed to carry however big it is. If you've got a garden the size of Broughton Park or Heaton Park, and that is your back garden, you're allowed to carry within the entire back garden. The exception is if it's not got proper partitions or carmelites. That becomes a carmelis, you can't carry more than 4 arms. Another exception is if you partitioned it off not to live in, but for other reasons, for example, to grow vegetables in. Then the halacha is you're not allowed to, it's called a carmelis, you're not allowed to carry more than 4 amos within that area. So the problem is, over here we're talking about you did the behutzav adafta, which means the partitions are amazing. And the halacha is nevertheless not allowed to carry more than 4 amos. Why not? If we're talking about where the walls were swaying, so you can say the partitions were no good, and that's why you can't carry more than 4 amos. But Rabbi Yaakov says when the walls are swaying, it's not a wall at all. So therefore, we're obviously talking about the case where you've done the hutzav adafta. If you've done the hutzav adafta, this is my back garden. If it's my back garden, why am I not allowed to carry more than 4 amos? Answer is momish without dir shetashmish le'avir. B'chol dir shetashmish le'avir imitat lo Beis osayim. The halacha is an enclosure which is not made to live within, but rather just to look out from is not a normal enclosure, and you can't climb more than 4 amos. That means nobody ever lives in such a tree for the sake of staying within the tree. Why would people build such a structure, make the hutzah with that? Only to be able to oversee the gardens, the farmland, etc. So therefore, in such a situation, since the purpose of the structure is only for that which is out of the structure, that is not considered a proper sukkah, a proper room, a proper structure, and therefore you're not allowed to climb on farmers. It's called Dirush Tashmish. We talked about it today, where, for example, you've got a guardhouse. But the whole purpose of staying in the guardhouse is only to look out. The halacha has got the same halacha of this Beis of sign. They're not allowed to climb on farmers. Toshema. The halacha is that if your person walks out of the tchum, how far is he allowed to walk? 4 amos. Person by mistake walked out of the tchum on Shabbos. He's only allowed to walk 4 amos. I measured this Shabbos where I was staying was a very small village. I couldn't really add houses because between each house was more than 70. So I counted 2,000 amos. 2,000 amos is 2,000 very small steps, which is 1,000 times moving your right leg. It's a very, very short walk. We'll talk about less than a kilometer. So less than a kilometer, an average speed of walking, you can walk to about 6 kilometers an hour if you walk properly, good speed. You talk about less than 10 minutes walk. So if you go away to a deserted place, you can't walk more than 10 minutes away. And yeah, you can walk 10 minutes in that direction, then you can go home and then walk 10 minutes in that direction. Yeah, you can do that. You did that. I did that actually. If it's built up, so you're allowed the whole town, and then 10 minutes past the village, wherever you are. Now, what happens if you went out more than that? You're only allowed to stay within within 4 hours. Let's say you walked out of the tchum and you landed in a house. You're allowed to walk anywhere inside the house. What happens if you didn't go to a house, but you arrived at a place which is an enclosure? You're allowed to walk anywhere which is within the enclosure. Now, what's in an enclosure? So the Gemara talks about, we had it over here, I've got pictures over here. But for example, imagine you've got a wheat field, and the wheat field, all the wheat grows 10 tefachim. And within the wheat field is being cut out a nice big patch of wheat. So you're within that area. So you've got now, easily, you're within the enclosure. So therefore, you're allowed to walk anywhere within this enclosure. Is it clear? Or for example, a different situation where you're standing on a rock. The rock itself has got 10 tefachim height to the top of the rock. So the rock surface is considered to be an enclosed area because we say, good ask mechitza. So therefore, if you're standing on a rock, you walk 2,000 amos out of the shus, you're allowed to walk anywhere within the rock because that rock is considered an enclosed area, or any kind of area which is enclosed. If you've got a wall around you, if you're in a garden, that's what's it. So most like this. Toshma shovas betil. If a person stopped in the tail, that's a pile shugavasa. V'ma'aba was place of sign. V'chein beneka, or a hole in the ground shomo kasor. V'ma'aba was a place of sign. V'chein komo ketsura. A place which has been harvested with shibolos and grain or stalks. Here, it's talking about the case where you started in the enclosure, so the 2,000 amos begin after the enclosure. Now, grain, if you are sitting in a wheat field and you've cut out in the middle of the wheat field a patch, and you're sitting in there, that's considered an enclosure, and you're allowed to walk 2,000 amos from that enclosure, because that enclosure is considered your house. Now, grain sways with the wind. So you just said, the Rabbi Yaakov just told us, everything that sways with the wind is not a mechitza. As well, where before Shabbos came in, you wove into the grain other branches, palm branches, daphne is thorns. And then what happens is you weaved into the grain, and now the grain does not sway with the wind. I know you're not thrilled with it because how can you do such a thing? But that is what the Gemara says, and that's how we pass them. The halacha is that it has to be not swaying with the wind for it to be considered a mechitza.
Some people, without referring to specific names, what height of grain is based on the fact that although it's not meant grain, that's not law on its own.
Right.
It's too big.
Yeah, Hajj right. As I said to you, it's a big discussion.
Well, they have an extra.
Yes, because that there's machlokas in the put. Yeah, 100%. This question is not a modern day question. Mr. Bo discusses it. The question is, it only sways a little bit. It doesn't. The whole thing doesn't collapse. It only flaps within its own area, and that is a question as to whether that is kosher or not. That's a question which has not been decided. since the Mishnah, the Chazdish argue about it. As far as the Mishnah says it's okay, and the Chazdish says it's not, it's maybe vice versa. They give it a hechsher because they say at the end of the day there are many persons that say that it's okay. I did have a tafka of the Succca now for a time because I was renting things, and what I did was I did these lovage straps, the lovage straps. But they give a hechsher based on the fact that many hold that it is okay.
The fabric itself
Yes.
would withstand the wind at all. Only because it's touched the
No,
metal.
that's fine because then the wall, that the metal is part of the wall. It's like saying if you build cement, if you build a brick wall, you have to look at the whole thing together. It means, is it something which sways in the wind? That's the question. It means it has to be 10 tefachim not swaying. Actually, it's interesting. This thing is mainly I bought it because of the pictures, right? Mainly because of the pictures for the wall, right? Here, look. And it's got over here, can you see? This discussion, it's got a curtain sukkah, and here you've got yourself the frames, and therefore, it brings over here, just like this, it's machlekas, and therefore, it says over here, it says in machlekas, and therefore it's impossible to definitively say, it's impossible to definitively say whether it's kosher or not, right? This is something that I don't think anybody can really. It's a big question what to do.
The ones that say it's not, would that pass the Succca in Torah?
Unfortunately, yes. That's right, yes. Have you got a sukkah not?
We use these straps.
You do? I was doing this earlier, I was looking at it. I don't know why. Unfortunately, I have a relative who stopped keeping mitzvahs. But for many years, he was from. Many years. And I remember one year going to visit him in Succca, and he was working really hard making the straps. According to many poskim, I will not give you nightmares. You have to do the straps chassis forever, crossways and normals. Many poskim say this. And I came to see him, and he was busy doing the straps both ways. He was working hard at it. I remember thinking to myself, he had the curtain, but he was choishesh because the Shiur says that that's no good. And then he was doing the straps. And even after he did the straps, he was still concerned because there's a shitta the Taz holds. It's not enough to do it one way, you have to do it crisscross. You have to make sure there's less than 3 tefachim in either direction. So, but unfortunately now he doesn't keep Succca. What? No, it doesn't keep it. Okay, but at least I suppose it gets half for those years, hopefully. Okay, the next mission is already like the more, like lighter, more exciting. So it's Shabbos, 5:07. Not tomorrow. I can see they was going to come, and